Crave was conceived as a way to deliver our strong educational mission and our membership's desire for their continued learning. Through the Crave series, our chapter will deliver webinars and virtual meetings to deliver timely and relevant topics that are affecting our industry today.
It's about the effort that we expend to connect with people. But you have an opportunity to see people, you have an opportunity to chat with people. We may not have an opportunity to have appetizers and share a drink with each other, but we stay connected, and that's really the most important thing.
Being able to work together and learn together in a new format, a new environment, really helped us take those pre-existing relationships and friendships that I had to another level.
CoreNet has taken the leadership in these kinds of conversations for years and years, and so we're delighted to have this long-term relationship with CoreNet.
I found the CoreNet to be a great community of dedicated real estate professionals, and what it means to me is it gives me a wider network of people with whom to share ideas, to derive the best learnings, to test and experiment with things that I'm working on.
This program is all about personal growth and becoming the leader that you want to be.
CoreNet has always led the way when it comes to supporting the professional development of our members. Our roundtable discussions, our education workshops, and our professional development programs are just part of what makes CoreNet so valuable to our members. It was critical for us to find a way to still be able to facilitate all of this. Crave has provided us the platform to be just as effective and to still provide that value to our members in a virtual environment.
CoreNet not only provides a platform for different groups to come together regardless where you come from in terms of organization, but really help each member to feel like they belong in this organization.
We have a diverse membership base, and you will find that members come from all walks of life and from all over the world. However, it's still an area of focus for us to improve upon and to embrace equity, inclusion, and diversity through increasing awareness and taking action, as we know this will lead to more success for the organization and for our members.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Williams, and I'm the Architecture and Design Manager at Knoll. And thank you again for joining our discussion today on the future of workplace wellness. I will have my co-chair, Gable, introduce herself now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ashley. I'm Gable Clark. I'm a partner and director of interior design at SGA and a proud member of the CoreNet Education Committee. And we're very excited to have you all here today for our seminar, What is Next for Workplace Wellness? So we have a few CoreNet business slides to go through first with some upcoming events, and then we'll get started. So you can see on the screen here the upcoming Crave webinars that are happening, including the Eastern Regional Symposium on Monday and some additional events happening over the next couple of weeks. And our Young Leaders Forum, Reframing Your Future, coming up, a little more detail there. And the next session, the general session, Reframe City Level, Monday on May 17th in the afternoon. See the moderators there and some of the other additional sessions that are taking place. So feel free to visit the CoreNet New England website to register for any of these sessions. We're excited. And there we are on social media. And thank you so much to our corporate partners. We certainly couldn't do any of this without you. So really appreciate all your support, especially during this time. And our sponsors as well. All right. So after the seminar, actually at any point during the seminar, feel free to submit a question via the chat. And we will be monitoring those questions, and Ashley will ask a few at the end of the session. So if anything comes up, feel free to put it in the chat, and we will be sure to address it. So we'll be here today until 1 o'clock, but certainly if you have any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to any of us. So without further ado, I think Ashley will introduce our panelists.
Awesome. Thanks, Gable. I'm delighted to be joined by our three panelists today, Dr. Kati Kamkar, Sari Kalin, and Lindsay Marash. For our first introduction, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kamkar. Dr. Kati Kamkar is a clinical psychologist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. She is the assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto and is also the executive director of the Canadian Association of Fire Investigators. We are also delighted to have Sari Kalin, who is the assistant director of health and well-being strategy at Liberty Mutual Insurance. She focuses on identifying strategies and tactics to improve the health and overall well-being of Liberty's U.S. employees and their families. She has extensive experience developing well-being strategies and programs in the corporate, community, and academic settings. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Marash, who's the director of tenant experience at Wellable. After her company, Chasing Nirvana Yoga, was acquired by Wellable, she stepped into her role as the director of tenant experience, where she works directly with landlords, property managers, and community managers to understand the makeup of each building and implement amenity wellness services on a building or portfolio-wide scale. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. And now I'd like to hand it off to Lindsay for a mindfulness exercise. Lindsay, you're on mute.
I knew that was going to happen. Great, so we'll start with a mindfulness exercise today. I'm also a yoga instructor, so this is totally in my wheelhouse, and I'm excited to teach it to you guys. So let's just start by sitting up well. You can plant your feet firmly on the floor, place your hands on your thighs. I'm going to start by closing your eyes this morning. Take a couple normal breaths as you dive deeper down into your body. And take a deep breath in through your nose and a long breath out through your mouth. And just take a moment to imagine that you're wearing your comfiest sweats, which maybe right now you actually are. And you can feel the softness of the fabric wrapping around your body. And as you step outside, you're greeted by the New England fall morning. Cool crispness is in the air. As the wind streams past you, you snuggle a little bit tighter into your sweatshirt. You slowly start to walk on a wooded path towards a river ahead. And take a seat on a rock that's right on the river's edge. Notice the silence and stillness. Nothing but the wind sort of rustling the leaves above. And as you look towards the river, notice the current moving the water downstream. As the next gust of wind blows, a leaf from the tree above slowly drifts into the water. And you watch it floating there for a moment as the river turns it around and around, and the current moves it downstream. And watch it intently until it has moved completely out of sight. And then another gust of wind and another leaf succumbs to the motion of the river. And this time, as it floats past you, you place something that's been weighing on your mind, a stressor, a trauma, anxiety, worry, whatever you choose, just choose the one that keeps you up at night. Maybe the one that wakes you up before your alarm in the morning. And just place it on the leaf that's floating in the water. And allow the river to hold that stressor. Watch as the river moves that stressor downstream. And watch until the river frees you from that burden as it moves it out of sight. Another gust of wind, another leaf in the river, and choose the next thing that's weighing on your mind. Place it on the leaf, and allow the river to slowly take that burden off your shoulders, and watch it until you can no longer see it as it moves downstream. And as you sit here on the river's edge, you do this exercise again and again until you are left with nothing but the sound of the rustling trees. Feel a little bit lighter as you take a deep breath in and a long breath out. Now slowly open your eyes. Thank you guys so much. I hope you feel a little bit calmer as we move into our discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, Lindsay. I hope I'm not too relaxed to moderate. I'm going to do my best shot here. Thank you so much. It's nice to be able to take time to do those things. So our first question today, thank you all panelists for being here. Our first question today is for Dr. Kamkar. Dr. Kamkar, we've all felt the effects of this pandemic in various ways. If you could, please take a moment to help us understand a little bit more about how this shared experience has shaped our emotions and how our response may have evolved over these past few months, and certainly as we start to think about re-entry. If you could share some thoughts there, that would be wonderful.
And good afternoon, and thank you so very much for having me. It's such a delight and honor. And yes, such an important topic. We certainly know that with the pandemic, and we have seen this, a lot of studies being done in a lot of countries, that they have found that our mental health needs simply have been on the rise. And it is not surprising because we have seen that with the pandemic, in a relatively short period of time, we had to kind of recreate new routine, new structure, new habits, essentially a new normal, not only once, but throughout the pandemic and to this date, because of the constant fluidity, constant unknown, and the uncertainty. And yes, we have experienced and we have certainly seen an increase in reports in terms of depressed mood, anxiety, mood irritability, but then also fatigue and boredom as well, and a sense of isolation and loneliness as well. Now, we also know that with COVID, of course, it is a grief, it is a loss, and we can view it on a continuum. From one end, people saying, you know, I just miss going out and grabbing my coffee and newspapers, seeing someone, to, attending parties, celebrating my birthday, to, of course, the other end of the spectrum, having to do with death and illnesses and losses. Now, we do know that, while we're talking here about wellness and mental health, health is health, whether we are talking about mental health and physical health. There is always this appreciation for a holistic approach to care, whole person management approach, and of course, a system approach when we are talking about workplace mental health. So it's always around a healthy workplace environment and the supportive environment we want to create and appreciate when we talk about wellness, of course. Secondly, always being able to identify what are the risk factors at the individual worker level, but then also at the organizational level, and so that we are able to build and identify our protective factors, again, once at the individual worker level and of course at the organizational level. Now, when we talk about prevention, because this is something that I always find very helpful. When we talk about prevention, there's always prevention continuum of care. And same goes when we talk about physical health and about our mental health. So there is primary prevention, so anything that we do prior to an onset of an illness. So it could be, for example, this talk that we are having, right? So building awareness and conversation, reducing the stigma, building our resiliency, identifying risk factors, and being able to minimize our risk factors, and of course, boosting our protective factors and resiliency. Two, there is secondary prevention continuum of care. So here we might notice that, okay, there is a problem or there is a stressor and we need to attend to. Or we might experience symptoms that could be mild to moderate. So again, something would be peer support, social support, evidence-based treatment. Sometimes it could be any workplace-related matters, accommodations, and so on. But nevertheless, there's something that I need to attend to. And there is tertiary prevention of care. So this is here when symptoms might range from mild to moderate to severe, collaborative care model. We need work accommodation, disability management, evidence-based treatment, and so on. And as a clinician, really my work, it has to do with that tertiary care. And we do know that when we talk about, let's say, major depression, anxiety disorders, or trauma or stress-related disorders, especially post-traumatic stress disorders, substance use disorders, these are among the many mental health conditions, but they are increasingly being recognized, which is positive, increasingly being recognized as part of workplace mental health prevention and intervention. So now more than ever, of course, with, again, another new normal in terms of, okay, the returning to work in a different shape and form, of course, another new normal, because again, with COVID, despite the devastation and the losses and so on, we also need to recognize what have been some of the new learning, what have been some of the positives that we learned, right, for our growth, personal growth, psychological growth, workplace growth, and so on, and how can we individually, but then also organizationally as a community, build that sort of new normal when we are talking about reentry. Of course, now I can talk for another 20 hours, but I'm going to stop so that I have my wonderful colleagues here who can take the stage. Thank you again.
Thank you. That was wonderful. We appreciate it. So Sari, your focus is on employee wellness at Liberty Mutual. Can you share with us some of the strategies that you've employed during the pandemic to help support your employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say before I start, I believe every session should start with a meditation like you did for us when, Lindsay, I'm going to say anytime I'm on a panel again, I want somebody to start with the meditation first and think about bringing that back also into our work environments when we're remote and when we're back in the office. And secondly, Dr. Kamkar, you gave such a great overlay of really the mental health experience, that it's not an individual sport, it's a team and organizational sport as well. So let me talk about Liberty and what we did during the pandemic. And I think it's a playbook that we had before. We really leaned into it during the pandemic and will take us forward. And there's three things. It's really listening, communicating, and then and connecting. And as you hear me talk, you'll hear how you can overlay those into what Dr. Kamkar was talking about, right? Is like listening is really about understanding what is the employee voice, what are employees experiencing. And we have other data about what employees are experiencing through our health plan claims, but we have recently started a function called the Global Employee Experience, and that we started that before the pandemic, and during the pandemic they were up and running and able to do frequent pulsing and surveying and focus groups to help us understand what are people's concerned. Are they concerned about emotional well-being as we continue in this work away from the office environment? Is it stress? Is it burnout? What can Liberty do to help them if they have a caregiving concern? The second piece about communicating itself can be an intervention because people can feel heard. Our leaders were communicating authentically about the challenges to health and well-being and mental health, and the struggles that we were all facing during this pandemic. They were really focused on empathy, understanding different perspectives, and building social connection. Another piece of communicating was reminding people about all of the tools that we have available to support their well-being. So we have primary prevention tools like a resilience building app that you can start working on your your resilience and your coping skills. If you have 1 minute, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes a day, it has meditations like what Lindsay led us through, and other types of exercises to help people improve and change the way that they respond to stress. We also have a lot of programs to help people who may have different physical well-being concerns, because we know that mind and body are interrelated. So if somebody's having trouble sleeping, that could be related to depression or anxiety. And on the flip side, if somebody is having depressed mood or anxiety, the lack of sleep could make it worse. So we have a digital sleep improvement program that really we promoted heavily and got a lot of usage during the pandemic. And then we have, of course, counseling, a lot of which was delivered through the virtual channel during the pandemic year. And it's offered broadly through our health plan and also through our employee assistance program for people who aren't on the health plan. And then the next piece is connecting. We heard Dr. Kamkar talk about loneliness and isolation. And we heard from employees too that that's what they miss. They miss connecting with people. Like in my background here is from Cafe M. That's was our hub of activity in our headquarters building in Boston. So how could we transfer that online? Liberty has an extremely strong diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And through that, we offer 7 different employee resource groups. We know that having a sense of belonging and a sense of connection is one of the strongest protective factors for people's mental health. And the ERGs really leaned into offering this programming, whether it was focused on self-care, focused on parents and the particular stresses that parents were facing, or focused on all of the racial injustice and social unrest and the challenges that we continue to face. So let me give a quick example of how this could all come together in something that we did during the pandemic. We heard through our employee resource groups and through our surveying that caregiving was a concern. And certainly everybody, you can understand that people are working at home, juggling their own work and juggling being their kid's teacher and phys ed coach and everything like that. It was very, very stressful. But we could have just pulled solutions off the shelf. Let's just do what we think is right. Instead, we dug in and we had focus groups and one-on-one interviews. And when we heard, like, you know what, people don't want backup care days for their kids right now because they don't feel that that's safe to send their kids to backup care. What they would like is some support for enrichment activities for their children, and also some search capability to help them locate a selected caregiver or maybe form a learning pod. And that's what we brought forward. It'll be a really important piece of our strategy going forward, is this continued listening. So I will stop there, but.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you, Sari. That's helpful to hear. So Lindsay, your focus at Wellable, even pre-pandemic, has been on wellness. So can you share with us some of the things that were most popular or important to tenants pre-pandemic, some of the strategies that you were employing even before we started to go through this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I think it's also important, because I work directly with building owners and managers, it's important to understand what tenant engagement really is. In real estate space, we refer to it as tenant experience or tenant engagement, but the end user is still the employee. So tenant engagement is really just a layer of the employee experience that is being offered on site. And so, as Sari said, it's really important to keep a pulse on what the tenants want and what the employees are looking for and that demand. And so Wellable puts out an industry trends report each year, which goes into detail about what those demands are. And pre-pandemic, we were seeing that employers were expecting to invest more money into mental health, stress management, and financial wellness. And so what we were seeing was more of a shift towards a holistic approach to wellness. And pre-pandemic, the most popular services that Wellable was offering were our wellness challenges, which were always virtual and digital. So they only kind of upticked during the pandemic, as well as on-site, fitness classes, chair massage, health coaching, and educational webinars. And I also think it's important, in this conversation, at least the questions you kind of have lined up for me today are really about like pre and post-pandemic services. But it's important not to skip over where we are now and where we've been, the past, year and a half, and the changes that we've seen. And so what we've really been noticing is that from a property perspective, we used to offer services individually on a building by building basis, and we're really starting to move during the pandemic towards a portfolio wide approach. And that means kind of like offering services from the top down and streaming those services across the portfolio, be it national or even global, rather than offering those on-site services directly at the property level. And I think that is something we've seen transition during the pandemic, and it's probably not going to go anywhere post-pandemic. And within that, those services that we're seeing provided to tenants are, again, a lot of the virtual stuff that you can do. So on-demand fitness classes, specialty services, anything that really keeps those tenants and employees engaged. Maybe it's like learning something new, maybe it's a knitting class, but also our wellness challenges, as I mentioned, because they were always virtual, is very easy to implement. And from a building perspective, properties can really create this healthy sense of competition and engagement, either across portfolio or across tenants within a building.
Great, thank you so much. So I think we have a poll question coming up, right, Ashley and Rachel?
Yes. So Rachel, would you mind sharing the question? We'd like to ask everyone, how ready do you personally feel to reemerge and re-enter the workplace? So go ahead and take some time to answer that, and we'll take a look at the answers once we get some in.
So
and Rachel, yeah, go
sorry, I was just going to say we'll give everyone a moment, and then Rachel, you let us know when you feel like you've got a good response and we can see what it is.
Will do. Just over half, it looks like, who have responded right now. If anybody else wants to, get in now. Give me another 15 seconds. We'll do a full minute. All right. Not seeing any more come in. Oh, there's another one. Oh. All right, I'm going to end it now. And I will share the results.
Awesome. So it looks like the majority is somewhat ready, and I'm same on board with that. Does anybody want to kind of add to the results?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, of course, daily, at least here in Massachusetts, it seems information changes and, new dates are thrown in front of us. So I think we're trying to react as quickly as we can. But I suppose I'm not surprised that the majority of folks feel somewhat ready, but still, I imagine it takes a lot for us to, shed what we've been used to. So far, Dr. Kamkar, and sort of, having to shift our focus now to doing something totally different. So any thoughts from you on that regard?
These are great questions and survey. I really like it. It's very helpful. I'm not at all surprised with the results. When there is uncertainty, there is more certainty, but nevertheless, it's uncertainty. And when we know we have a lot of things yet to juggle and adjust to, it's going to be another new normal, and having to readjust and having to build again further resiliency. It's like, yes, it is more that, I am ready, or maybe not ready, or maybe it's somewhat ready. And that's fair. That's actually the current situation. At the same time, we want to appreciate, we all experience, that's normal, what we are calling anticipatory anxiety. So it's the anxiety prior to an event. So if, let's say, we have this major math exam tomorrow, we know we're going to feel more the stress and the anxiety today than tomorrow when we're literally writing it. So there is this anticipatory stress and anxiety. How am I going to manage? Am I going to manage? I hope it's going to be okay. The commute, like 1 million questions we're going to go through our mind. Now, the other thing is that we want to keep in our mind is look at the amount of strength and resiliency that we have shown throughout the pandemic, right? Initially, we thought in our mind, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and this is over a year after. And in no time, we had to, again, readjust. A new normal had to boost our technology knowledge and the virtual world, and really had to adapt. So much that we had to learn in a very short period of time. So this here goes to show how much we have shown resiliency. And yes, it is the same amount of strength and resiliency that we will show for that new step, and to really reassure ourselves that, you know what, whatever it is going to be, I will be okay. I will make it. It will work out. It will work out.
Great, thank you. And Sari, what are some of the steps that you're taking at Liberty Mutual to prepare your employees for some form of reentry?
Yeah, I think, the main thing is where the most of our employees will be working from home and through the summer, but we're really just keeping the focus on employee well-being with a strong focus on mental health. And I was listening as you were saying, Dr. Kamkar, about the anticipatory anxiety. I'm thinking back to like the first day of school every year, right? When we go back to school, multiplied by so much. There's so many questions. So I think communication, again, is going to be very important. People want to know, what will I be able to expect when I go back to the office? And I think we're just trying to, whenever we're doing communicating, we're reminding people about their resilience and strength. As you mentioned, Dr. Kamkar, is we've been doing this. We've leaned into new ways of working and ways of connecting. We found that we were stronger than we realized. We couldn't have predicted this before. And I'm reminding people of that, reminding people of Liberty's commitment and continuing to listen as we go through. In particular, this month, we're doing quite a lot around mental health because it's Mental Health and Awareness Month here in the U.S. So I can share a few more details on that. I don't know if you'd want to hear them now or a little bit later in our conversation.
Sure. Let's hear one or two now.
Yes. So
we timed our webinar perfectly with the mental health awareness.
You did. So ahead of Mental Health Awareness Month, our CEO did a fireside chat style video about the importance of prioritizing mental health, reducing stigma, making ourselves aware of Liberty's resources, listening with empathy, and being really sensitive to people who may be struggling, to again destigmatize that idea of getting help wherever you are in that continuum that Dr. Kamkar outlined for us. This month, we've been having a series of panels hosted by our employee resource groups. I had the honor of moderating one earlier in the month about mental health stigma in communities of color with 3 experts from the Black, Latino, and AAPI community, and talking about how the stigma can overlay and make it even more difficult to get support, and what people can do on an individual basis to let their colleagues know it's okay to not feel okay. There's strength in sharing our struggle, so that everybody knows that they're not alone and they can go, move forward to get support. Liberty also just started its 7th employee resource group called ABLE at Liberty, which has a focus on individuals who have disabilities, their caregivers, and their allies. And I think that's going to be really bringing a lot of this discussion forward.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So I think we have another poll question, right, Ashley?
So for our next question, we would like to ask you, in your opinion, is your organization adequately prepared to support employees post-pandemic? So we'll take some time, and if you could please fill that out, that would be great. And Rachel, after a minute or so, you can pull the questions or the responses then.
Sure.
Thank you.
Got about another 30 seconds.
The countdown begins.
And also a reminder to submit any questions that you have, and we'll address those at the end of the discussion. So feel free.
Ten seconds left. those last minute answers in. Okay.
All right, so this is great. So it looks like a lot of the organizations are getting ready, and that's great to hear. I feel like even with my company, I've had a lot of information, and we're all coming back towards, coming into the office 3 to 4 times a week. So this is really great. Sari, do you want to touch on what you think about the results?
Yeah, I think other employers must be doing what Liberty's doing, which is there's been a lot of time to think about, as much as things have been shifting, there's been a lot of time to think about how to prepare people for going back. And again, we're leaning into well-being. That's really a consideration, and listening. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's just so important to understand what are the moments that matter to our employees, and how are we delivering on those moments when they're returning to the office. So our global employee experience will really be helping us lead the way to understand when, what are people expecting, and what do they want when they come back. I know when I was chatting with Gable a little bit in our preparation for this, Gable asked me about survey fatigue. I don't know if you want me to address that a little bit.
Actually, I think that would be great, because I know, obviously Liberty Mutual is a great organization, and you've got a lot of folks that are focused on this. But for some of the smaller organizations or mid-sized organizations that might not have the resources, what are some of the strategies they can do? And are surveys a good idea, or are people, fatigued by those? Or what would you recommend to those that maybe have limited resources, but certainly want to put their finger on the pulse of how their employees are feeling?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the most important thing that our global employee experience group did for us was to try to get a handle on how many surveys were going out. We're a huge organization, and everybody was doing sort of these disparate surveys in addition to our employee-wide surveys. And they really got a handle on that, so that we're avoiding that survey fatigue. So even in a small organization, to be able to get a sense of what is it we need to know. We don't necessarily need to ask everybody. So that's, we can do some type of sampling. I'm not a statistics expert, and so I can't share that, but there is, I know within our organization, we have about 35,000 in the United States, but on our surveys, we're surveying much fewer people and being a little more selective, so that we're confident that the results reflect our broader population. And then if surveys don't seem like the right format, or you don't get good responses, another option is doing one-on-one interviews or focus groups. And we've been able to do these online as well. The focus groups, I think, take a little bit of practice to get people to share. The one-on-one interviews, it's more developing the questions and then asking the questions, and to be quiet and listen to what you hear and synthesize afterwards. So I think there's a lot of way to get employee voice without overwhelming people.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Kamkar, what are some of the strategies you think that we can help ourselves, our families, each other use to cope with stress? I know we talked a little bit about, meditation exercises, and if you have a little bit of time or a lot of time, but what are some of the things that people can take away from this conversation that they can use to help themselves in a positive way?
All right, so because here I'm a clinician, this is my favorite topic. We all have to literally sit here for 10 hours because we are going to talk about tips and strategies. So if everyone can take a paper pen or the computer and so on, so that again, anything we can pick and maybe start implementing certain things. I'm sure we know a lot of things is like, yes, I might be stating the obvious, but we all know as human beings, we're not always that good at practicing what is the obvious. So it's really, first of all, we want to normalize our reactions. So we talked about range of thoughts, our range of emotions, and we need to normalize them, because if I'm not normalizing those reactions, I'm going to start feeling I'm the only one. And there's going to be a fear of the symptoms, a fear and anxiety of the reactions, and it's just going to further intensify the reactions and the emotions. And again, feeling more helpless and powerless. So very important to normalize however we are going through. The second point here is, as we have also talked about, the importance of reaching out for support. Now, I always say to everyone, we do not need to, gather 20 people. It could be quality support network. It could be sometimes 2, 3, 4 people, etc. One person we feel comfortable talking about work stress, another person finances, another person having fun and laughter, another person talking about relationship matters, etc., etc. As long as we know we are able to reach out and there is some level of deep connection, depending on whatever areas of our life that we want to talk to. Now, when we talk also about social support, there are also different layers within it. There is also what we call instrumental support. So this is when it's like, I need to reach out for help. I need to ask for help. And certainly, of course, if we feel any signs of symptoms, they increase over time, they create more distress over time, interfere with our functioning and daily activities, responsibilities and functioning, it's very important to seek professional help. But also at any time, I say to people, anytime you want to talk and seek professional help, you're definitely welcome to do so. We never need to reach at the clinical level to be able to do so. And certainly with the virtual platform taking center stage, there is access to help, building access to, it has allowed us to build access to care and the services, no concern about commute or traveling or cost related to commute and so on. Then there is also informational support. So this is, for example, when I'm feeling that, I came up with that project, but I would benefit from gathering more information. Then there is feedback. So this is when I think that, all right, I made that decision, but I'm going to benefit by gathering feedback. Then there's what we call emotional support. This is when I just need the listening, the sympathy, the empathy. The point here is that whenever we are working on building our individualized care, because that's very important. I always love to emphasize that individualized trajectory to building our self-care and the well-being, quality of life and resilience, is really we want to maximize our support, our resources, and our strength. Now, as part of support, again, is how to practice what we call off-duty, right? Especially whenever we are in a human care profession, in a human service profession. We give a lot, which we want to, but it means that we also need to honor our needs and our emotions. So self-care, very important, setting time off, time to recharge our batteries and rejuvenating the self. It's very important when we talk about grief, at any type of grief, when we're talking about burnout or having to deal with so much roles and responsibilities, moral distress, compassion fatigue, and so on. That's a loss. That's a grief. We start losing the self. And so we need to protect the self, but always also setting time to recharge ourselves. And people sometimes tell me, well, what does that mean? And we so this is when it goes that sometimes we're not even normalizing that. We think, oh, no, it's not normal for me to set time for myself. No, it's very important. And I have to literally tell people, it's like, maybe do nothing. Sit on the couch and maybe do nothing. Normalize that. Grab a book, sit on your, on your bathtub, or go outside for a nice walk in a natural environment. Watch your favorite movie, whatever you want to do. We need to recharge ourselves. So that also means when we go home, when we are at home, of course, we are attending to everyone and care and so on, but there is need to set the time for the self, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. Sometimes people, it could be in the evening, however it is, but we need to prioritize our schedule and reprioritize it then depending on all the duties and the demands. The other important thing is to always catch our tendency to engage in our negative self-talk, negative self-labeling, right? The tendency to judge ourselves. So very important to catch that so that, again, we put those thoughts into perspective. We are able to balance the thoughts and definitely recognize our hard work, our achievement, and our positives, and praise the self. Again, here people say to me, well, what do you mean? I didn't do much today. We have a tendency to, whatever we do, to dismiss ourselves and discount it. Anything counts. I want everyone to remember, anything counts. Anything above 0 counts. And look at your base level. Our base level might be here, super productive, engaged, and so on. But you know what? Sometimes it's going to be here. That's okay. That's fine. That's normal. So take it down here, and from here, just put whatever it is, and everything counts. You had to do that load of laundry that you dreaded. Perfect. Put that on the list. Check mark. Congratulations. You had to send those important 5 emails. You did that. Check mark. Congratulations. Whatever it is. But very important to set those activities depending on our baseline once again, and check mark, check mark, check mark, and praise yourself. That's a positive, and also practicing gratitude. Of course, all those are part of feeling self-care. Balanced diet, very important. I always say to everyone, once again, people say, well, can I have a treat? Look, depending on your medical conditions, restriction, limitations, always keep that in mind. But again, I want people to develop their individualized strategies. I'm never like prescriptive, don't do this or do that. Those things, again, it has to be practical. It has to be realistic. So I have my own treat that I love, vanilla ice cream with my apple pie. Do I want to have it once in a while? Yes, please, I want to have it. At the same time, I'm very mindful of a balanced and healthy diet because it has a direct impact on our mood and our health. Exercise at home, people have been super creative, stretching exercise, any exercises we can do virtually and so on. But we also know, once again, keeping in mind any medical and limitations or restrictions, and of course, following with safety guidelines, we know walks or exercise in a natural environment tremendously helps our mood, concentration, sleep, and energy. Once again, keeping and considering all the safety guidelines. Now, 2 things I'm going to mention. I'm going to state the obvious, but we're not that good at practicing the obvious. So 2 things. So the number 1, when we want to wake up, we want to ensure there's fluid. So there's fluid. We have our water to make sure of that. And any little stretching exercise, 2 minutes or here, depending again, medical limitations and so on, we want to start with stretching exercise. But the point of that is that throughout the day, because of, again, stress, anxiety, and a lot of computer and so on, we all become bubbled up, like we all like this, right? And we can experience pain in our shoulder, neck area for a variety of reasons. It's very easy to forget being hydrated and to do a little stretching. So now I like to put hot water here, and I put a little bit of lime, and I put like this organic mix. So let us all have fluid here, so we stay hydrated. And what's important is to have it actually in front of us. You don't want to have it, in another room. Have your fluid intake right with you. Now, let us all practice here also stretching, depending on, again, however medical limitations or restrictions and so on. If we practice those little bit here, few seconds, we're talking about even few seconds, half an hour, every hour, and so on. What it does, when we are hydrated and that little, stretching, it actually helps with the blood flow and the flow of the circulation of the oxygen. That helps the thinking, our decision-making, regulating better our thoughts, and staying more connected to the moment, and also better regulating our emotions. So we really want to keep that in mind. The other thing is really around grounding technique, which is also one of my favorites. We know with anxiety, we take the helicopter and we travel to the future, right? A lot of the worries and so on. With sad mood, low mood, depression, we have a tendency to travel to the past. With stress, 1 million directions. So it's very difficult to stay connected to the moment, present time. And it is important to do so. The more we are connected to the reality and present time, the better the thoughts and our decision making, and we can better regulate the emotions. So grounding technique we can practice throughout the day. And I always say to people, use it to your benefit. Identify the positives and use it to your benefit. It's using our senses to feel grounded. What do I see, hear, my body touches, the sense of smell and taste. For example, we're walking outside, you want to feel the fresh air touching your face. Am I listening to the birds and feeling the fresh air, the flowers, or you're looking at the colors, the bricks of the houses, the tree. This is my favorite one. Oh, wow, look at the flowers blooming. You enjoy your tea, feel your tea. You spend 2 hours in the kitchen with your meal. You want to enjoy your meal, however you want to use it. Self-compassion as well. I'm going to finish it right now with the self-compassion. Actually, it's a summary of everything. Very important. It's a relationship with the self, especially during this difficult time. And we know COVID has been very challenging. The first part of it is, as we have talked about, identifying a range of thoughts and our emotions so that we are able to take an objective stance. and say, hold on here, let me view them more objectively so I can reframe them and put them into perspective. The second part of self-compassion is practicing self-kindness. The more open and caring and kind we are to the self, the more open we are not only to others, but to the world as well. And as part of the self-kindness is taking a more humanistic approach, knowing we're all human beings, we all make mistakes, no one is perfect. Can we look at the past to see what was helpful? Absolutely, for better today, tomorrow. Can we look at the past to see what was not helpful? Yes, but not to dwell and ruminate, but to use it proactively for today and tomorrow. And finally, if I can maybe finish it here with one of my favorite quotes. It's just one sentence. And I think, and I love all the points that Sari has mentioned to us. Kudos to you. I think I just love it. So really kudos to you. That's hard work, but there is authenticity, there is genuine trust, there is genuine care, and people are able to see that. There is here, so this quote is by Brené Brown. It turns out that trust is in fact earned in the smallest of moments. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but it is through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. And I think that probably here what we have all talked about, right? So how to be able to maximize those so we can all together move forward to tomorrow and after tomorrow. Thank you from heart to heart for having me.
Those were wonderful strategies. Thank you. We really appreciate all that great advice. And you did hit on something that I think is worth following up on. And Sari, I would imagine you have some thoughts here too. Going back to the self-care and sort of being aware of your boundaries and when you need to take a moment away from work and those types of things. During the pandemic, there's certainly been this expectation of constant availability, and one Zoom runs into the other, and you sit down at your home office in the morning, and before you know it, it's dinner time. So I've heard it described as, instead of working from home, it's living with work. So it's harder to compartmentalize and find those moments for that self-care. So I believe, Sari, in some of our previous conversations, you talked about a strategy that Liberty uses to try to encourage people to do that. So if you could share with that quickly, and then we'll hear a bit from Lindsay before we wrap up at 1.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, we've done a lot of messaging around self-care, and our Women's ERG did an incredibly popular series, a whole series on self-care, bringing different speakers throughout the pandemic and beyond. It's interesting, they started working on this before the pandemic, and wow, they were really right on top of things. So we have programs to address the different elements of self-care, but the main thing is making that time to do it and seeing that it's important to our survival. It's not a luxury or an option. So I'm so inspired by Dr. Kamkar's suggestions as well. And I love that quote on trust, because that is the key. I think in our values, right, is for people to trust each other, to be open, and then you can really make progress together.
Great, thank you. And Lindsay, would love to hear some final thoughts from you on different strategies that you're seeing or you would recommend, or even how those strategies or offerings that you have at Wellable have evolved during the pandemic. So would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, pre-pandemic employees were seeking a more holistic approach to wellness, and what we're seeing through our industry trends report is that COVID has really just accelerated those initiatives. And so kind of bouncing off of what Dr. Kamkar and Sari have said about isolation, people looking for a place of belonging and connection, going forward, there's really, post-pandemic, there's really 4 pillars that you'll want to focus your efforts into, which is community, socialization, learning, and health and wellness. And to Dr. Kamkar's point, the kind of self-care aspect falls under that health and wellness pillar. And so you want to find programming and events that target mental and stress management, mindfulness and meditation, and you want to layer it on top of the things you're probably already doing and we're doing pre-pandemic, which is like the physical activity, and maybe even add in some personal and professional development. But I also think that's what's important as we think post-pandemic is not just understanding what services our employees and our tenants are looking for, but equally important is how do we deliver those services, right? So the word phygital has been thrown around a lot recently, which means combining the physical object with the digital platform. And Like, I personally don't think I would have gotten through COVID without like Grubhub and the Peloton and the Starbucks app, right? So it's taking that physical element and combining it with a digital platform. And Lisa Picard of EQ Office wrote that the future of office is digital, and at Wellsville, we really couldn't agree more. So in a post-pandemic world, building owners will need to apply that concept to amenities that they offer. And while some companies are choosing not to return to the office at all, which you've heard a lot about, there's plenty of companies that will return to the office per usual, and then a really large subset that will return while providing more flexibility to their employees. And we've heard a lot about the 3-2-2 shift schedule, right? So that's 3 days in the office, 2 days working from home, and then 2 days off. And programming and events, properties will need to reach their entire community, whether those people are working in the office or working from home. So for properties to assist tenants in creating an employee experience through tenant engagement, it will be the building owners and the property managers and the community managers' job to go beyond their four walls, which I think the companies and the properties that have been doing it well during this time, during this pandemic moment, that haven't just kind of dropped off with the tenant engagement and the employee experience, are really going to be those companies and those buildings that prevail as we emerge from this pandemic. And so what they need to do is create a physical space, but also a digital place for community socialization and learning. And due to companies providing employees with more flexibilities, buildings will need their engagement initiatives to be offered both on-site and virtually. So landlords and management companies we work with are shifting away from, I think I mentioned this earlier, but they're shifting away from that property level approach and starting to take a portfolio-wide perspective. And so doing that will help like brand your portfolio. It creates a sense of community across buildings and through these shared experiences that you're creating. It's also a huge cost saver, which is just an added bonus. And this approach will work post-pandemic because those working from home can log into any virtual event, and the property managers and community managers on site can be tasked with creating a space for those events to happen in person. So you'll gather a group of people together that are in the office and can still socialize and convene and get together and still participate in those events as well. And so combine this with a few on-site events at various properties, and you've really tapped into that digital approach to tenant engagement as we move forward post-pandemic.
Great, thank you. Well, in closing, I would just like to say it's wonderful to have all of you here offering your perspectives, and it's certainly nice to acknowledge what we've been through, and that it's okay to focus on ourselves and really, give ourselves the attention that we deserve as we sort of navigate these ever-changing times, and also to understand what everyone else is going through and develop that empathy and really take the time to relate to each other as human beings, because that's really at the end of the day what it's all about, and that's so important in every aspect of our lives. So want to thank our panelists so much for being here. We really appreciate all of your perspectives. And Ashley, any closing thoughts?
No, just another big thank you for everyone's time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you all
so much. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.